From the primordial chaos of the Taviri Ocean, the great Karkalisk oak grew, and from its boughs a world was born. Gods of thunder and trickery, earth and fire, life and death walked the land, shaping mortals in their own image. But this age of myth now collides with a new era of invention. The rhythmic pulse of Alater engines echo through ancient forests. Great airships soar over lands still haunted by spirits. And the cold war between the whimsical old gods and the zealous one true god threatens to plunge the realm into a new and devastating conflict. Gardar Realm is a complete campaign setting for 5th edition, where ancient Slavic folklore meets a sweeping techno-magical revolution. It is a world of bogatyr heroes and interdimensional witches, of skyfaring merchants and soul-stealing mages. This is a land poised on the edge of change, where the choices of a few brave adventurers can topple kingdoms and anger gods. Also available are several companion sourcebooks which expand the setting even further: foes and opponents, factions and pantheons, treasures and trading, peoples and tribes, and an entire volume dedicated to callings you can add to your campaigns. Each book is an absolute bargain for the sheer wealth of content it contains. Dmitry Ryabchuk, author of Gardar Realm, was kind enough to lend his considerable skill to translating my superatomic RPG into Russian, so I took the opportunity to grab him for a quick interview to talk about his Slavic RPG masterwork, now available on DriveThruRPG. What first inspired you to create Gardar Realm, the Grand Compendium? Was there a particular moment, story, or aspect of Slavic mythology that made you realize the setting needed to exist for roleplayers?
I think the very first moment that I can connect it to the inspiration for the project happened back in 2016. I stumbled upon a different artist by the name Roman Popsuev. He lives in Russia and he's creating his own version of Slavic fantasy, but his approach is more Warhammer 40k oriented, and he's also not interested in TTRPGs. He's more interested in creating a world for people to write stories about. He has collaborated with a few Russian writers to make these story anthologies about his world, which is really cool. I'm really happy somebody's doing their own thing about Slavic myths, about Slavic fantasy. And he also comes from a really good background. He used to illustrate stuff for official Game of Thrones books. But when I saw his stuff, and at the time I was not working in 3D as I am now, I was actually studying for anthropology. I was doing my PhD in anthropology. And I thought that this is really cool, but this is more of him doing whatever he wants. And I, as an anthropologist, probably could maybe do a more deep dive into that stuff. And it only started back then, but it took me up until 2023 to slowly start thinking about, well, I have all the small parts that I can now start assembling into the project itself. Also, what really helped was that I, at the time in 2023, was doing a small D&D project with a friend on YouTube. It was a sci-fi Eldritch D&D project, and it gave me sort of this good, experience of trying to assemble an entire D&D book for an adventure. So when I started doing the Gardar Realm Grand Compendium thing, it kind of was already easier and not as scary, and I already knew what I kind of wanted to assemble it into. Yeah.
Slavic folklore is vast, regional, and deeply layered with oral traditions and local variations. How did you approach the challenge of researching and reconciling different sources while maintaining authenticity in your portrayal of myths and spirits?
I think a good analogy of what it feels like to explore Slavic folklore is like peeling an onion. You did say that it's deeply layered, but it's not just layered with traditions, it's also layered with a lot of fake stuff that was created as a result of different historical ideologies, different historical movements. So in the 90s, for example, there's a wave of neo-paganism. And if you look up online, there's lots of resources that people from that particular period were posting about Slavic myths. And most of them are just, oh, I just came up with this, I decided to post it, therefore this is part of the Slavic history, Slavic myths. No, that's horrible. Then if you go lower, there is the communist period, and communists were very particular about presenting Slavic history as this really amazing thing, and we have to rewrite a bunch of stories to make the simple men look better, less of the royal or knyaz type characters. And then you go below, there is the Russian Imperial period. And the Russian Imperial period was also sort of the dominant culture trying to describe other cultures from their perspective, from their more elevated position, and that affects the way the myths were described. And only below that, if you can find any sources, there you get to the actual, the closest you can get to the actual myths. And in order to do that, there was a lot of visiting the libraries. I currently live in Canada, but thankfully before the latest few cataclysms in our history, I was able to visit Russia a few times. And there is this amazing library, like Lenin libraries, like the largest library in Moscow and probably maybe all of Russia. And there are a ton of sources that you can find there. They're dated from the old imperial times, but they reference the actual wood scrolls, I guess is the best way to describe them. It's people who are, not so much people, it's documents that were written on bark, as the sort of old Slavic documentation is written on bark. And sort of whichever myth I was researching, as the oldest version of that myth was driving the rest of additions I was making, because at the end of the day, I wanted it to be a Slavic fantasy, a Slavic setting that could be fitted into D&D, because this is the system that I've been playing for the longest. This is the system I'm most familiar with. So this was sort of the structure that I was pursuing, going deep into the oldest possible version of the myth. If there were translations from Polish, if there were translations from Ukrainian, Serbian, perfect. When I was assembling the stuff, if there were any gaps, I would go back, if possible, or I would ask my father to go to the library and look up stuff for me. If there was nothing, I would try to access stuff online, but not Russian stuff. Again, other countries. And I'm really thankful that there is ChatGPT, because if Google Translate wasn't able to properly translate what I needed, I would put the text through ChatGPT just so I could get a better idea of what the original source is trying to tell me. And yeah, that was my way of trying to kind of make it authentic as much as possible.
The tone and texture of Slavic folklore often feels darker, more elemental, and closer to nature than many Western mythologies. How did you capture that atmosphere in the design of monsters, deities, and player options for D&D without losing playability or accessibility for modern audiences?
So there was a lot of playtesting that I've done with my friends to sort of flesh out the mechanics, flesh out the player character options and the monsters, but the main idea was to sort of remain still authentic. So even though it might feel dark and maybe a bit uncomfortable. I tried to preserve that with the racial options, with the monsters. Slavic myths have all sorts of undead from different botched rituals. There are Gmuri, who are sort of these Slavic dwarves, and they're ruled over by, I call her the Lady of the Copper Vein, but a more direct Russian translation would be the owner of the Malachite Hill, which is why their area where they live is called the Malachite Hills, and she owns that area. But specifically in the myths, she has a preference for talented people. So regardless of your race, she would sort of force you, if you enter her domain, and if you show that you do in fact possess talent for a particular craft, you are forced into this weird relationship with her where you practice celibacy, you also practice your craft, and you sort of dedicate all of your craft to her. And this is what she did in the myths. She would consume the minds of young craftsmen who would abandon everything but their craft so that they would be closer to her. Then there are also different racial options, and some of them are more normal to a degree. There are shapeshifters, which is quite normal for Slavic myths. People can shape between frogs and human forms, wolves, squirrels, so on and so forth. But then there are also beings that were born out of different unions, because people of the myths, but it doesn't even matter whether they're Slavic, Scandinavian, Native American, and so on and so forth, they were very hoardy. And there are spirit kin, people whose parents had a relationship with a Leshy, or like the tree spirits, or the Vodanoi, the water spirits, Polovics, the field spirits, and so on and so forth. There are also monsters that are born out of dead children if those children were cursed before they died. So yes, Slavic myths are very much dark and visceral, and I don't want to leave it all out. I want it to be authentic, even if it may feel uncomfortable to some people.
When adapting Folklore to Dungeons & Dragons framework, where did you draw the line between mythic authenticity and game balance? Were there any creatures or ideas that you had to change or simplify for mechanical reasons?
I think the primary issue that I stumbled into initially was how if I translated the artifacts and the monsters into the game as is, they would be too overpowered. So thankfully, to a lot of playtesting, I managed to sort of strike this more fun balance. I am a DM who loves having more fun with my players rather than being strictly rule-bound. So even if the thing that we're doing breaks the game a little bit, as long as people are having fun, that's cool. And if it helps keep things authentic as well, perfect, lovely. But, for example, there are no actual gods that you can fight. There's the entire Slavic pantheon that you can interact with, but there's no god slaying as you might find in other settings. And even still, you can have CR 28 creatures. For example, Kощей Бессмертный, which is Kощей the Deathless in translations. He is almost like a god, because if you look into the myths, he is not just some undead. He seems to be the manifestation of Veles, the god of the underworld, the god of like reincarnation in a sense within Slavic pantheon. So yes, he deserves to be this final boss, the BBEG of your campaign if you want to. There is also Zmei Gorynych, which is the three-headed dragon of Slavic myths. Yes, he also deserves to be the campaign boss if you want to, but you're not going to be running around and killing Perun or Lada, the actual gods of the setting, because that would not feel authentic to the setting. Maybe it would feel authentic to a more eldritch setting, a more maybe Asian-oriented setting, but Slavic people generally do not kill their gods. They live alongside with them.
The art direction and aesthetic choices in Gardar Realm are strikingly distinct. How did you collaborate with artists and visual designers to ensure the look and feel matched the cultural and spiritual tone of the material?
So I realized early on as I was learning how to do art that realistically all I need is time, and I could do a bunch of things myself. Yes, it would be slow. Yes, I would feel maybe slightly annoyed that it's taking time, but at the end of the day, I would have all the creative control I want, and I would be doing the thing that I really want to make a reality. So on this project, I did not collaborate with anybody. I did everything myself, from the writing to the artistic stuff. I started with sketches in my sketchbook, just basic pencil doodles. And then I wrote them over into Procreate, which is this iPad drawing app. And I would start properly fleshing out from the sketches into the line work, and then iterate on coloring. I am very much okay with people using AI for their stuff. I have used AI to get some color direction if I wanted to. And basically every idea went through this pipeline of sketching, line work, figuring out the colors, and maybe kit bashing the colors and parts of the texture, and then bringing that into the final part of the book. That allowed me to sort of create and keep this distinct look, because I was the only driver of the style, of the choices, where they're monster choices, player character choices, the scenery that you can see in the book. All of that was thanks to just me focusing on myself. And it took roughly 3-ish years properly to get it to the version that you have now. So yeah, if you really want to have full control over your stuff, just do everything yourself. It'll take time, but it'll be worth it in the end, I think.
Your book stands out not just as a game supplement, but as a cultural document. What were some of the more surprising or personally meaningful discoveries you made during your research process?
I think there were 2 surprising discoveries for myself. First one was when I was researching all of the myths. My mind was also going back to the time when I was a kid and when I was watching the Russian cartoons. And some of them obviously were based around Slavic myths, Slavic fairy tales. And now coming back to that, I realized how much altered they were, how much dumbed down they were, because real myths were much more dark, much more visceral, and there was just this layer, I guess, of protection for the kids. And the other one was just how little I actually knew about my own sort of cultural milieu, what myths there are, what are the actual original versions, or the closest surviving original versions of those myths are. And like, we're not taught that at school. We're not even taught it at university, unless you go specifically for philology and Russian history. And I went for modern Chinese politics because I was curious about China. I was curious about Asia, Japan, all of that. So I kind of missed out up until I came back as a proper anthropologist and started doing my own research.
Looking ahead, do you see Gardar Realm as a living setting that will continue to grow with expansions or community projects? Or did you feel you've captured a complete expression of this mythic world in the Compendium itself?
Oh, there is absolutely room to grow. And if there are any community-created projects, I would be very happy. But currently, I am working on an expansion. It's called Warmongers of the Veil. If you were to follow through with my original campaign, you would essentially create a magical cataclysm that would affect the entirety of the setting. And there would be sort of this hole in reality, and through that hole, other beings would step into the world and vie for power and control within the realm. And the expansion is based on Karelian gods. Karelia is an area in Finland, and it's also the area where the original Slavic tribes were interacting with the Proto-Finnish tribes. So based on that interaction, I wanted to add the Proto-Finnish deities and beings into the world, as if they are sort of entering and exploring and maybe getting this world to be a bit like their own, that what they want it to be. Well, I'm not gonna spoil too much, but yes, I would love if there was more of Gardar Realm, and maybe there will be other expansions that I will make. Maybe whatever the community decides to make, I would be more than happy if they did. Maybe I'll make a game at some point. It depends. I've got too many ideas in my head, and they all vie for power, and some of them get priority than the others.
Finally, if you had to choose one aspect of Gardar Realm that players will absolutely love to play, and one that Dungeon Masters will love to run, what would those be? What makes those elements uniquely Gardar Realm, something players simply won't find anywhere else in the fantasy gaming?
Ooh, that is a really good question, because I designed so many cool things. I think what they will absolutely love, both the players and the DMs, will be the classes, because they're all based on actual Slavic myths, Slavic archetypes that you come across in the myths. There are Bogatyr, who are these like strong, blessed by the land people. There are Wolves, who are these Slavic druidy wizards. There are people who practice soul magic. There are people who were trained by the Yagas, who are sort of their own actual race in the setting. And you can combine the classes with like 20 plus racial options. There will be more in the expansion. And all of them are uniquely Slavic. I think that's the cool thing that I hope everybody will love about the setting, and everybody will notice that, oh, this hasn't really been done before for Slavic myths in D&D. So yeah, I hope people will enjoy it.